Today I'm going to talk about a religion which is probably going to spark some controversy. Before I get into it, I want to mention that I don't use the word cult in a derogatory way. The word cult can have some offensive connotations. It's like an insult. When naming something a cult, I never intend it as an insult. I want to point out that I have a lot of Christian viewers, and chances are I'll probably get around to your religion too. If I do, don't be offended. Just consider what I'm saying honestly. I still appreciate your support against Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and other destructive cults. That being said, today I want to address Catholicism. Let's get into it. I want to cover a few things before I get into why I think Catholicism is a cult. Just know that I've already called it. It's a cult. When I look at a religion and analyze it to decide if it's a cult or not, I usually go through a mental checklist. It isn't flawless, but here are some of the things I look for. Bear in mind, these things don't actually have to be sanctioned by the church. It's just behavior I look for from the members. In fact, it's possible that an established church doesn't even exist. I've seen people believe in something so fervently that it was like religious zeal. Mercedes versus Corvettes, for example. So here's my mental checklist. Number 1, I look to see if the members heavily proselytize. Do they talk about it constantly? If you bring the conversation to something else, do they continue bringing it back to that subject? Do they get defensive if you bring up some counterpoint? Do they make you an enemy if you disagree with something they've said about it? Do they project their anger onto you by claiming that you're out of control and believe in some opposing view to the point of religiosity? Number 2, I look to see if they have any kind of specific and unusual rituals they do, which are unique or uncommon. This one is mostly religious. For example, rubbing rosary beads, saying prayers over and over for some set amount of time, studying or reading literature which has a bias. You can see that in Jehovah's Witnesses, who read literature produced by the Watchtower Society. This also applies to an unusual amount of praying, before meals, before bed, before getting in a car, a set number of times a day. Catholics, Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and a few others are big on that. 3. I look to see if they're heavily guilted into or out of doing something, whether by the church or fellow members. The whole point of this is that it heavily controls some specific part of your life. Usually cult members have a carrot and a stick. If you blank, then blank. If you don't go to church, then you will go to hell. But if you blank, then you will blank. If you do go to church, then you will go to heaven. That's the Catholic method of control. Jehovah's Witnesses have a laundry list of things you can and can't do. And if you do or do not do these things, then you will be separated from friends and family for the rest of your life. If you do or do not do these things, then you will be in paradise with them. You'll find that shunning is a lot more common than it should be. People form friendships based on what others think or believe. They're artificially putting themselves in an echo chamber, thus reinforcing their opinions by shielding themselves from opposing ideas. Which brings me to my next point. 4. I want to know if they're discouraged from or voluntarily cut off contact from people who would otherwise be considered to be normal members of society for things that aren't viewed as particularly heinous or illegal by an outsider. For example, consuming a caffeinated drink. Mormons will shun you if you drink caffeine. Mormons started a college called Brigham Young University, or BYU for short, where you have to subscribe to a number of moral obligations or you will be expelled from the school. They don't have caffeine anywhere on campus, or anywhere near campus for that matter. You can't be caught alone with somebody of the opposite sex. There are far worse cases than that. As mentioned before, Jehovah's Witnesses will tear your family apart if you're found doing something against their rules, like smoking cigarettes, going to a funeral or a church service sponsored or run by a group other than their own, or even taking a blood transfusion in an emergency. All of those things are normal parts of life and normal in society, but they will shun people who do that stuff. That's not normal, and it's not okay. Even if it seems like a good thing, like not drinking alcohol. It's a way to control you, and it's ultimately destructive, if for no other reason than that. 5. I look to see if they bend the truth in the church's favor, even when they've done something obviously wrong. It doesn't have to be in the case of wrongdoing, though. I'll give an extremely vanilla, seemingly unrelated example first. If the member loves BMW, and they know that the Infiniti is just as fast, just as high quality, and has just as many quirks, but they find all the bad points of the Infiniti and exaggerate them. The infinity parts are too expensive. You're paying for the name, not the part. Here's another more extreme example. Jehovah's Witnesses claiming that they were persecuted in World War II, just like the Jews. The fact is, they were persecuted in Germany in World War II, but they were allowed to convert out of the religion instead of being executed if they wanted. They were given the option of signing a contract saying they would renounce the faith and they'd be allowed to live. You can't convert out of an ethnic heritage. Claiming that they were persecuted on the same scale as Jews in World War II is detestable and disgusting. They're trying to piggyback on the real persecution of another group of people, and that is the definition of propaganda. Which leads me to my next marker. 6. They subscribe to what I call theocratic warfare. This isn't a perfect term because the word theocratic implies a god has to be involved, when I've seen cults which had nothing to do with God. Android versus iPhone, for example. In any case, theocratic warfare is when the members believe that lying, bending the truth, or manipulating people is justified if it's in service to the cause. That's where propaganda comes from. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the United Nations is the beast of revelation, but when asked about it, they lie. They claim that it isn't true to rope them in until they convince them that they're right. Then they reveal the truth, claiming that they do celebrate holidays or that they don't shun family members. Those things are lies, and they're designed to make the religion look less oppressive than it is. Only when you get in do you realize the truth, and by that point you're willing to do it too. Sometimes you'll hear a cult member say something like, "I tried being X and I realized it was wrong. That's when I became Y. I tried being an atheist and I realized I was wrong. That's when I became a Jehovah's Witness." Or they'll accuse you of having a religious opposition to their position. "You love BMW like it's a religion," or "atheism is a religion." That's my personal checklist. The member doesn't have to meet every item on the list, but if they meet most of them, I consider them a cult. Let's see how Catholics compare to this checklist. 1. Do they proselytize? I would say so. Bear in mind that just because another group may apply more aptly to an item on the list doesn't mean that this group doesn't apply at all. Jehovah's Witnesses knock on doors every Saturday morning. They clearly proselytize constantly. But just because Catholics don't do it as much as Jehovah's Witnesses doesn't mean they don't do it at all. Check. Do they perform uncommon or unique rituals? Yes, they have to say specific sets of prayers, sometimes while rubbing beads. Have you ever heard the term, say 5 Hail Marys? That term comes from the fact that they have rosary beads that they have to hold, and they count up from the cross. They put the first bead between their fingers and they say a specific prayer for that one. Then they move to the next bead and say another prayer for that. They keep going until they reach the main strand of the necklace, at which point they start saying the Hail Mary prayer for each bead. Every time they touch the next bead, they say this: "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." Sometimes they repeat it for hours and hours. So yes, they perform uncommon or unique rituals. 3. Are they heavily guilted? Catholicism is all about guilt. If I had to describe it in one word, it would be guilt. The fear of hell. If you don't come to church, you'll die and go to hell for all eternity, while we sit up in heaven laughing at you as your skin melts off. It's a staple of Catholic culture. 4. Do they cut off contact with friends or family? I think they do, but I don't think this one applies as heavily to Catholics. I'm sure there are some extremely serious members who do it, but I don't think it's as intense as some other religions. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. 5. Do they bend the truth in the church's favor? Oh yeah, they do. Just think about all the pedophile priests they moved around to protect them from prosecution. And many of the members, not all, but many, ignored it. Pretended it wasn't happening, still tried to convert people and left that part out. That's not the only thing the members have lied about for the church, but it's a big one. 6. Do they subscribe to theocratic warfare? I feel the same about this one as I did about number 4. I don't think it's as pronounced or intense as in the other cases, but it's there. I would consider this one a little less worrisome in relation to other items on the checklist. But like I said, I could be wrong. Correct me in the comments if I am. Anyways, I've called it. They're a cult. I think the thing that really pushed me over the edge with these guys is the rituals and the guilt. Okay, that's all I've got for you. Thanks for watching, guys.